Lovely to be with all of you, and yes, lovely to see some old faces. Linda, seen you after a long time, so lovely to see you. So this evening's topic is on noise, noise, news, and negativity. And I'm not going to spend too much time around noise, news, and negativity because I think we know what it's all about and how it impacts us. Just give me 1 second. But it's useful to understand a little bit of the impact of things. And when I think about noise, what is noise? Noise connects us with this whole aspect, with this discord, lack of harmony, lack of rhythm. And I remember once I was in India, and if any of you have been to India, one thing that's very prominent in India is that there's noise all the time. It's never a moment of complete silence. And I was with a friend from Germany, and we were in the courtyard in Ahmedabad, and we were chatting. And there was some banging happening somewhere because some construction was happening. And her comment to me was very lovely, which I always remembered. This was a good few years ago. And she said, look, if you're listening to an orchestra, there's the drums, the trumpet, and everything that's going on, right? So it creates music because of its unique sound. So even in life, when we are in spaces, we cannot control the noises that appear. But if we just look at it, that it's part of the orchestra of life, everything is happening as it needs to happen in that moment. It takes away that kind of feeling that this is jarring my space. Today I had to do a meditation with a group of people, and they were cutting the lawn outside.
Shiva, hello.
Hello.
They just asked if you can speak a little louder.
Okay, is that better?
I think just continue.
Yeah. So, at that moment when we were doing the meditation with this group of about 15 people, there was noise, and I could either get irritated because this is a sacred moment and to say, stop the lawnmower or whatever. But it was almost like knowing that you can't control and stop everything, but keep focusing on the energy you want to create. And it was amazing to see and sense the space in the room, that it was like that noise faded into the background because the focus that was being created was a lot louder. Put this by the speaker. Because I can't think if I have to shout. Honestly, I can't think if I have to shout. Yeah. So basically, looking at it from that perspective, that not to feel that the sounds are intruding, but rather to look at it as right. I am going to focus on the energy that I want to create. And in that way, inviting everyone to be in it. And it's amazing that how that became the experience for everyone rather than feeling that intrusion of the space. Because that's why we don't like noise. We feel noise intrudes our space. And so recognizing that, we can't control, but let us change perspective, let us see it differently, and let us flow with it. Let us create the focus and the energy we want to create so that that overrides what other outside forces around me. The second thing is about news. And I think the last 5 to 6 years, we live in a world called post-truth. So even what we're getting fed and what we think is news, there's so much of complexity in it. There's so much opinion fed into it. There's so much of perspectives that we are fed that it's very difficult to know what is truth and what is not true. There's so much that is being generated by technology as well. And I think I'm very aware that it's important to be aware, not that you put your head in like an ostrich in the sand and just say, oh, it's a peaceful world. No, that's not what it is. To be aware, but how much am I absorbing? And how do I begin to process things in a way so that it doesn't absorb me emotionally? And sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes you are fed images of children being hungry or dying or whatever. And then it's difficult not to feel absorbed emotionally. But to always remember that if I'm absorbed emotionally, I cannot effect change. I cannot act in a way that can, bring about the kind of world that I want. There was someone, a friend of ours, who played quite a significant role as an activist. And he once shared in a gathering that we were having with one of our senior teachers. And he said, I get so angry. And the response that Daddy Janki, who was the administrative head at that time, gave to him is that, yes, you are angry and you may feel very justified to be angry, but does your anger serve in creating the world that you want to create? It's like I can't create something positive with a negative energy. And I think that requires a lot of inner work to realize that I cannot create anything positive or contribute positively if I'm coming from a space of negativity, if I'm coming from a space of anger, if I'm coming from a space of disheartenment, of frustration. I have to take the responsibility of letting my own inner world and my feelings be in a space of peace and at least neutrality. Then it gives me clarity to be able to respond. Think about it. When you are agitated, we can't see many possibilities then, can we? When we are agitated or you are in an argument, can you see many options? Can you be creative when you're being agitated? No, we can't. We can't. It's like that agitation always creates the feeling that we're facing a brick wall. So what we need to do is we have to learn to find that center of peace inside of ourselves, a sense of calm, because calmness brings clarity. And calmness enables us then to also become creative. Because in a way, our world needs our creative energy to help us move forward. And so we need to generate that energy inside of ourselves. And there are 3 practices that I'd like to share today, because it's really about how do I nurture my peace. And one is that, knowing that nurturing my peace doesn't mean avoidance. I always say it would be wonderful if we all had a cave in Table Mountain to ourselves and we could just go home all day and be away from the world. No, we can't do that. We have to engage, we have to survive, we have to live, and we have to contribute. One thing that is sometimes a bit difficult to swallow, but the state of the world is a result of our collective consciousness. If we have been part and parcel of creating this, then we also have a responsibility to contribute in changing it and shifting it. And that's the key thing. So 3 practices that I find that are useful and valuable. One is what I call the 3 dots. And these 3 dots are something that are very fundamental to our practice. The first thing is really about stabilizing the self in the awareness of the self as consciousness, as a soul. Coming back to an inner identity. Because what takes my peace away is when I let my sense of self be dependent or influenced by things outside of me. It's almost like whether my sense of identity, when it's based on what I look like. Okay. And so if I'm approved, if I'm complimented, I feel comfortable. That's fine, but it doesn't last all the time. What I looked like 10 years ago, I don't look like that now. So what happens is if I base my sense of self on what I look like, then what tends to happen is as that changes, then my peace begins to fade. Okay. So there's many different ways in which we have given our sense of value and self to things outside of us. Our bodies, our positions, our nationalities, our, how we've graded ourselves, or how we've thought of measuring our sense of success. All of these things have had its impact on us. So the key thing is really about coming back to the real self, or the authentic self. Who am I? And it's a lifelong journey. It's really about getting to know me, my strengths, what are my value systems, exploring my belief systems, having the courage to challenge my belief systems. Sometimes that needs to happen, and coming back to that inner self. It's not a thinking exercise, but it's really about going inward and exploring and sensing for myself what feels real and where can I draw my sense of self-respect from? How can I make sure that I'm not, influenced by external forces, but I feel deeply rooted in myself, connected in myself? And the second dot is the dot of connection with the divine. Because in order to facilitate change and transformation, we need power. And we cannot do it by ourselves. We'd like to believe we can. Because what is the basis of transformation? What is the power that allows for transformation? It's love. That's what it is. It's the experience of pure love that really allows for transformation to take place. I like using the analogy of a rocket. When a rocket is flying into space, so much of energy is needed initially till it breaks through the pull of gravity. And once it's in space, then not a lot of energy is needed and it can go quite far and wide. And that's the whole thing, that we need a tremendous amount of energy to break through the gravity of our old habits, our old idea of ourselves. Because that old idea of ourselves is also an idea that we have accumulated based on our past experiences. We've created a personality based on layers of experience. And so the experience of pure love is what helps me to break through that. And when I can begin to experience love that is unconditional, it gives me a new perspective on myself. I stop seeing myself in an ordinary way, but I am then able to see myself as consciousness, as one that holds divine capacity internally. I begin to see myself as an enabler rather than just being impacted. So that's the second dot. And the third dot is the dot of life. And our usual approach to life is that we feel we need to make life happen, right? We need to, we think that we have to control things to make life happen. But when I stay connected with that source and remain in alignment with what is my deepest self, the energy of that then begins to influence the drama of life around me. So instead of trying to make life happen, I allow life to happen based on being present very deeply on who I am, what I'm connected to. Because then I know that at every moment, what is the response I need to give? We will always be faced with different situations. And when we are faced with different situations, one of our habits, and I'm saying our because it's something I've had to work through as well, is that we overthink. Am I right? We love analyzing and saying why, how, What if, so we overthink. And when we overthinking, what happens is that we're losing energy. And it's the overthinking that makes us, either sways us into the past because we're thinking about what had happened and how it happened, and, it leads to all of that. Or it takes us into the future and we begin to, worry and become fearful of things. And it moves us away from the present. So coming back to this place of calmness, and I come back to this place of calmness by just reminding myself who I am and stay connected. I'm not alone in this journey. But as I cultivate a relationship with that divine source, it will help me. It will help me to move through and give me the clarity I need for the moment. This reminds me of an experience of a dear friend of mine. She had cancer, cervical cancer, and at some point she was in like a semi-coma state. I used to record meditations and send it to her. And I told her family that even though she's in a coma state, just play the meditations for her. So they did that. I just, and she came out of the coma after about 3 or 4 days. And after a few months, I went to go meet her. I had the chance to meet her. And she told me something amazing. She said that when she was in that semi-coma state, she had the experience of this light. And he told her, it will all be okay. And that's all she had, that sense of this light that told her it will all be okay. And I was very moved by her experience in a way, because I think it's in moments like that it's like our consciousness opens up to knowing that no matter what our journey was like, that there is a divine source, a divine parent that has this deep connection with us and will be there. It's a presence that will be there, that will comfort us in our most needed time. And so not to forget that. I think we live in a world where we're very skeptical of spirituality and divinity and all of that. But in a way, it's also knowing that materialism is what has led to the conflicts we see in the world. Because it's like power, limited power over has blinded people from realizing the true value of our humanity. We've compromised our humanity for the sake of power. And that's where the conflicts all come from. And so we have to reverse that process in a way. And in order to reverse that process, it is really about igniting again that connection with the divine. And knowing that that source is there for me, that presence is there for me. These are 3 dots to use to come back to the present, to come back to being present, to help me act from a place where my presence is calm. It helps me to nurture my own calmness, so that my presence creates calmness. What we are being is what we create around us. And what we create around us then either supports us or distracts us. And so to always be mindful, what is it that I'm creating? What is it that I'm offering? The other practice that I find very useful, and that's the practice of learning to discern between knowing when I need to be an actor, play my part, play the role, roll up my sleeves, do what's needed to be done. And when I need to step back and rather observe. Because not everything we have to get our hands messed up with. Sometimes we have to allow things to play itself out. So it's about being the observer and also being in a way, when to be the dancer. When I'm the observer of the dance and when I need to be the dancer as well. Knowing to discern between these two is key. And so in observing, there are three things that are very useful. One is an honest observer of the self. Only if I create the practice of observing myself, then can I begin to see and recognize what are the energies that are moving me? What is the thinking or the patterns that are moving me? And that awareness gives me choice. So when there's observation over the self, then it creates awareness. And awareness gives me choice. If there's no awareness, then what happens? No awareness means I'm acting from habit. And habit is like, we have created so many habits. We have created habits of the way we think. We have created emotional habits as well. And when we're acting from habits, they're automatic. And when I'm coming from habits in a way which are automatic, then I have no control. It's like I'm being dictated by the triggers that stimulate various habits. So becoming aware, so as I observe myself, and I think most times what happens is we just move through life from one situation to another situation to another situation. We don't pause to actually observe what is happening inside of me. Where is it that I'm coming from? What pattern of thought is taking over here? Do you ever notice yourself? And I found this very useful, like observing my thinking. And you find sometimes how sometimes a small thing has happened, but how you've created such a big story about it. The long story that goes on playing in your head over and over again. There's an inner dialogue that's constantly playing in our head. And we have to ask ourselves, do I want to keep saying that story to myself? Is that story helpful? I remember once we had an event here, and one of the participants shared a story, and it was an experience she had maybe about 20 years ago.
And she repeated that story. And the facilitator, after the program, asked her, for how long are you going to keep repeating the same story? You know? And it's true. I mean, it was a story that meant something for her, but are you still going to hang on to that? You know, how long are you going to keep repeating that story? A friend of mine from Colombia put it very nicely. He once said, you know, there's an expiry date to when you can keep blaming your parents for the way you are. And I remember that because it's true. We have relegated our experiences, our conditioning, to various influences. And yes, they were influences. I'm not, um, you know, trying to make them small in any way. They were important. But how long am I going to continue saying because of? So it is about that first thing of really being honest with myself and saying, what is it that I'm sustaining in myself? That's where I have choice. And when I exercise that choice, that's how I preserve my peace. If I'm not going to exercise that accountability for my inner self, then I have no choice. Then I will have no peace because things outside of me will always be triggers. You know, I can never control anything outside of me. So taking accountability for the way I feel and really being that honest observer with the self. But when I am observing the self and I begin to see my old patterns, to shift out of those old patterns, the attitude I need is of compassion. Because if we hold an attitude of shame or guilt or anger or frustration at ourselves, it's like we keep giving the old pattern power. But as I said, it's love, it's compassion that helps me to move out of it. And I always told myself that, listen, when that pattern was created or when that attitude was cultivated, that's all you had the capacity for in that time. You know, sometimes we created a pattern maybe when we were kids or when we were teenagers or whatever. And that was all that I had a capacity for at that time. So I can't keep punishing myself or not having a bigger capacity. That was what I was capable of. So the compassion to understand that and to say, it's okay. Now you have greater resources. Now you have a greater capacity. You know, so gently moving out of that pattern is key. So an honest observer for the self. I was once in a silence retreat and I noticed how a certain pattern got triggered in the morning. And when I was sitting for the meditation, I just had this image like that particular, I recognized the incident that caused that pattern, you know, that triggered that pattern. And I sort of seen it like playing itself out on a stage. And the image that came up to me was, you know, the audience are gone. The lights have been turned off. You know, there's no one there now to watch this. You know, it's like over, the play is over. It's time to let go of it, you know? And I think to really recognize that we are constantly evolving and growing. And mostly, I think our journey is about letting go. You agree with me? Yeah. Mostly it's about letting go. And to know that it has no place now, it has no value now. And it's okay to release myself from it. So honest observation on the self. The second observation, when I look at others, to have be a compassionate observer of others. And this is vital because what takes away my peace is my tendency to be judgmental. And as I said, we love processing. Not only do we like processing ourselves, we like processing other people as well. This must be their situation, that complex, that attitude, whatever. So when I release, and it's just like remind yourself, and that's what I like doing in a sense, that when I see myself making up a story about someone else, I tell myself one thing, that is your perspective only. That is not the absolute truth. The problem with us is that we get very attached to our perspectives. And we hold on to it, we get attached to it. But remind yourself, that is just my opinion. That's not the truth. That's just a facet that I have seen and I've made judgments about, but that's not the absolute truth. Each one of us is so multifaceted. And we tend to just see a slither of a person and we tend to make up a whole story about them. Put them into a little box in our heads. And then every time we see them, we're seeing them through that lens. And what that does is that takes away my peace. Because any trace of negativity in me, as an attitude, as a vision, a perspective that I may be holding, it disaligns me from my truth. I cannot be at peace if I'm holding an attitude of negativity towards another. I cannot feel the love of the divine, which I need for my own transformation, if I'm holding feelings of hate or anger towards another. That's the reality. And when you weigh the two up as to what's the benefit and what is the damage I'm doing, and you realize it's not worth it. Disliking someone is not worth it. So just bringing that again, the compassionate observer of another. And what supports this is also to understand the law of karma. Law of karma is quite deep, but I think just to put it very briefly, it is really that recognizing that each one, whatever they do, they experience the fruit of that. Each one is paving their own path. And I cannot change the path of another. I can be there to support if they want the support. I can be there to offer love and understanding. But that's all I can do. Each one has to take the path that they need to take. And each one gets the return of that as they play that path. So always bringing back what is my responsibility and my accountability. rather than trying to steer everyone on the ship, steer my own ship in that way. And then the third one is quite a deep one, but it's when I observe the drama of life, observe it as a benevolent drama. And I think when we look at the world and we see what is being playing out, to recognize that it's very complex what we're seeing. And in its complexity, there are histories and karmic stories that are playing themselves out. And when I hold that awareness, then we need to always remember one thing, that what we see playing out now sometimes doesn't make sense to us. But there is a law of benevolence that will in a way care for each soul, in which that soul needs to be cared for. And I think why it's important to hold that attitude is because only then can I, it's like seeing a bigger picture unfolding. And only when I can see that bigger picture unfolding as it needs to, then can I let go and be at peace and trust. For me, two things are very important. One is faith and trust. Faith that there is goodness and that goodness will always prevail. And trust that if I keep focusing on the right energy and we keep encouraging each other to focus on the right energy, then that will create the right outcome that we all want. So it's about being that benevolent observer. As I said earlier, that what we want to create, we have to be that first. It's very easy to stand back and say this has to happen and that has to happen. But it's like what we want to create, we have to be that. That's the starting point. I think there was a woman called Margaret Mead who put it very nicely, that any kind of transformation always started when a few people committed and dedicated, began that process within themselves. It never happened from the top down. As we all awaken to a deeper reality, as we all choose to come from a place of love and healing and peace, we become those lighthouses. We have to inspire hope. And we can only inspire that hope when we reconnect with the beauty and the essence in our own beings, in our own selves, and learn to see that essence in others as well. Because it's like the faith in human goodness, as we hold that, then we can begin to generate that energy that's needed so that we can bring hope. And not only hope, but we can also create that kind of a focus of energy, which will, move all other energies and let it align with that energy. When they talk about chaos, one of the things they share that you can't control chaos. And we all have a tendency that when we see something chaotic, we want to roll up our sleeves and fix it all up, right? But chaos cannot be controlled and chaos cannot be fixed. And if I have to ask you what the world looks like now, it's chaos, right? It's crazy. If we can't fix chaos, if we can't control chaos, then how do we navigate through chaos? The only thing one can do in chaos is you need to create a powerful focus. So you know when you see a hurricane, that there's a lot of force and a lot of energy and all of that, but it all rotates around a focus, which is called the eye of the storm. And the eye of the storm is peaceful. So we have to become part of that in a way, that focus of peace, that focus of calmness. Nurture that in yourself. Because then the chaos of life around you will center itself around your core of peace. You're able to flow with change when you connect with that peace in yourself. And the last thing that I want to just share in a way, that is to nurture my peace and to protect my peace. I have to consider my peace as being sacred. And if I really value my peace in that way, the one thing is be very mindful, what am I feeding myself? You know, we all know on a physical level, when we feed ourselves with unhealthy stuff, then there's a consequence to that. The body reacts. And the same thing is that when it comes to my own peace, in a way, be mindful, what is it that I'm feeding myself? What is it that I'm allowing myself to take in as impressions, take in as influences? Be aware of that. So choose carefully and give time to yourself to nurture your peace. We say we want to feel peaceful and calm, but we don't give ourselves the space to do that. How many of us just take a day or half a day or even an hour and just sit quietly, listen to music that is beautiful, journal for ourselves, go for a walk in nature? You are so lucky in Cape Town. You have an abundance of that. You know, or just writing, journaling for yourself quietly in your garden, whatever, painting, whatever it is that helps you connect with that inner calm. Do you give yourself that space? So one is what I'm feeding myself, but another is, do I create space to create a different experience, to nurture that place of peace within me? Because as the soul, that's what I need. As the soul, that's what I need to enhance in me. Because my peace is not just a good experience, my peace is my power. It stabilizes me, it enables me to be creative, and it allows me to be transformative as well. Because where there's peace, it gives birth to love, and allows me to then engage with the world from a different energy. Okay, so those were some of my thoughts, and I'm mindful of the time. And just one or two questions, if there are any, I'm happy to take. And even if those on Zoom would like to ask, you're welcome. Anyone in the room has a question or a comment? All good. Okay. Yeah.
Presentation.
Yes. Yes. The question was whether this talk has been is available. Yes, it will be available. It was recorded on Zoom, so it will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel from Akmari, South Africa. You want to go back to it? Okay. Anyone else?
You mentioned in the three dots, personal self, and then love of the divine life. And what I'm wondering about with love and the divine is how to connect to them.
Yeah, yeah. So the question is how to connect with the divine. It's a whole course of its own. But I think, very simply put, firstly is stabilizing myself in my own consciousness as a soul. That's the starting point. And then I begin to create awareness of the divine as a higher consciousness. Because as I create the awareness of the divine as a higher consciousness, then it almost in a way makes me available to feel the power and the energy of the divine. So we use meditation as a tool to help create that connection. But it starts by first becoming aware that I'm not matter. I'm not physical in that sense. I am a spiritual energy. Because that then attunes me to the subtle presence of the divine. Because it's a subtle experience, it's not a physical experience. Okay, anyone else? Nita, anyone from Zoom? Can you read out anything?
Nothing on Zoom, no.
Okay, good then. So if there are no questions, that's good. You can mull around on this topic and just reflect on it more deeper and experiment with it. Experiment with the three dots. Experiment with being the observer on three levels. And yes, make time to nurture that peace in yourself.
Sorry, there's one question on Zoom that's come through. Can you please highlight how to break patterns? Because you mentioned patterns of thinking.
Yeah. To break a pattern is first to become aware of the pattern, because most times we're unconscious of the pattern. So that's the first step, become aware of the pattern. And the second step to breaking a pattern is, okay, recognize what triggers the pattern as well. So I have a pattern of, let's say, getting short-tempered. Now what triggers it? Maybe I feel insecure, and my insecurity, then I compensate for that insecurity with my anger. So understand the trigger, understand the pattern. And then the third step that I find is always to say, okay, what am I going to do to counteract what triggers the pattern? So it's not about suppressing the pattern, but to see, okay, what the trigger is that feeling of insecurity. So let me work on this feeling a sense of love for the self. I'm okay, I'm safe. You know, and even it means just take that moment when I recognize I'm feeling insecure, just take a few moments, breathe deeply, and just say, I'm okay, I'm safe. You know, I don't need to be defensive here. It's okay. You know, so you begin to create a new way of responding to that trigger. And then that's how you begin to change patterns. So become aware of it, understand the trigger, and then find a healthy way of responding to the trigger. Many times we try to suppress a pattern, but actually it's about understanding the trigger and working with that, finding a healthier way of responding to it. And the habit then falls away. The old pattern falls away. Okay, good. So I'd like to end off with a short meditation, which I will lead you into. And so just sit quietly, upright, relaxed. Breathe in deeply and gently breathe out. And with each breath, just allow the body to relax deeper. And as the body relaxes, feel a growing calm and stillness within you. And for this moment, I acknowledge that within me is a beautiful energy, a vibration of peace. And that peace I see it as a light within me, the light of my consciousness. The peace that's filled with coolness, a peace that's filled with power and stillness. Every other thought and feeling just dissolves. And I feel this deep calm within me, filling my being, the silence. It's sweet. The sense of restfulness. The serenity. I feel anchored in this peace. And like the still waters of the lake, it brings clarity. And that clarity creates a feeling of freedom, lightness, and freedom. I hold this feeling of peace within, knowing that this peace is an innate quality within me, a gift from the divine. What connects me with all that is safe. And holds me in a purity of presence and love. Just enjoy this inner feeling of being peace, feeling connected, of being full and slow. Thank you all.